Welcome back to another episode of Meet Cute, where we explore the stories of extraordinary people with radical meat-based beliefs. I'm your host, Alex Rhodes. In this episode of Meet Cute, we welcomed Brian Sanders of Food Lies. We go through his life, starting with his parents, eating from the food pyramid, and still contracting Alzheimer's and cancer. How his diet and lifestyle has changed since then, and the evolution of his relationship with food, mental health, and mindset. Oh, thank you so much, Brian, for joining us on the podcast today. It is such an honor to have you here. For you, those of you who don't know, Brian is at Food Lies on Instagram, and he's really calling it how it is. And he has a documentary coming out soon, correct?
Yeah, it's been years in the making, but we're getting to the last stages.
Oh, so exciting. I cannot wait to watch. I love me a good documentary. All right, so I want to start by asking, I see a few different references on your page about diet and lifestyle. You know, we have the sapien diet, which is also promoted on your website. And, you know, sort of an animal-based diet and some carnivore and ketogenic. You know, which one of these is it for you? Like, which one do you follow personally?
Over the years, I've just kind of zoned in on the sapien framework, sapien diet, whatever you want to call it, which just means what can humans thrive on. And it is a range between what you listed. It's something between kind of carnivore, animal-based, maybe could be keto, could be even more pro-metabolic. If you've heard of that crowd, they're eating more fruits and starches of, you know, whole food, the honey, the fruit, the starches. That's kind of started with this pro-metabolic crowd that it believes in all the same things. Are against the seed oils and the high polyunsaturated fats and linoleic acid in the diet. And they're really into meats and organ meat and all this stuff, raw milk, but they believe in a higher carb approach using fruits, you know, sweet potato, stuff like that, honey. I actually have a graphic that I haven't put out yet, and I'm trying to make it, where it shows that you can have this range in this framework where it goes from this kind of more pro-metabolic animal-based approach to the more ketogenic carnivore animal-based, but it's just somewhere in there. And there's a huge overlap in the middle of this diagram that I've created it's like kind of sideways, and it has all of these animal foods and organ meats and raw milk and just fruits and, you know, like healthy things. But then on one side, there's more fat side. And then over here, there's more carb side. And you can kind of like go back and forth between them. So yeah. It only makes sense if you can see it, but I haven't put it up anywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I definitely believe that, you know, we have access to so many things that our ancestors have been eating vegetables for so many years, and even fruits and anything in between. So I think there is this spectrum, as I would call it. Like, you know, we have a one end where it's more carb heavy and it's, you know, but then we have one end that's like carnivore keto-ish type. And, you know, you can definitely go back and forth between those. Cause I mean, I feel like if you think about seasonally, we didn't always have access to fruits and vegetables, like a grocery store.
And even carb heavy, that's like a loaded term, because carb heavy, what people eat today, 99% of people are eating the wrong type of carbs. There's very, very few people who are eating a, quote, carb heavy diet in the right way. You know, like very few, like 0.01%, and like they're in Austin or they're Paul Saladino or they're me or you. There's very few people that are like, who is actually avoiding all processed grains and sugar and, you know, seed oils and just eating like whole food carbs and like great meat and animal products. It's like, that's so few people. But if you're in that spectrum, yes, you can go more towards the carb side. You can more towards the fat side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so dependent too on how it makes you feel as an individual. Like there are seasons where I'm like I've been on a so-called build, and I've, you know, really been on the fruit and the, you know, and the honey and the raw dairy. And then, you know, I'm starting a cut, like a fat loss phase. But even for these last few weeks, my body's been like, you know, I think it's time for a break. It's time for a break from these, like, you know, a higher carbohydrate diet. And so, you know, I've been, you know, full carnivore, you know, for a couple of days now. Not too long, but, you know, it was just a calling. It's like, hey, my body's like, it's it's time, a little
Hmm.
break. And I love that there's no, like, you can just go back and forth in between these. It's really about listening to yourself.
It is. Humans have always done this, and we've eaten seasonally. I spent some time in Africa with the hunter gatherers. It's not quite the same anymore. They have way too much modern stuff going on in their lives. They've been kicked off their land. They can't get the fatty, large animals that we used to have. But what we did have was seasonal eating and different times where we had to eat different things. And in that intuition you're talking about, I interview guy Fred Provenza. He does animal science studies on this exact concept where they know what to eat. They can blind these animals into eat like two different feeds, and they know if they're deficient in magnesium, they'll eat the feed with the magnesium, stuff like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
they have these instincts, and humans have always had those instincts.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've actually read a similar, it was in a book that I read, but it was talking about they took, I think it was 15 children and put them in a home together. And they would cook a range of foods, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Meat, organs, you know what I'm talking about. And these kids
Fruit,
would,
everything. Yeah.
yes, would literally pick in accordance to what their body needed at the time. And I just, mind blowing how disconnected we are
Uh-huh.
from that.
And they would pick different things each day, and it would be all different, but when they kind of tallied up the nutrients, it all made sense in the end
Yeah.
where they got what they needed. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they were doing, was comparing them to, like, cattle in a field, or I think it was goats, maybe. I don't know, picking a
Hmm.
certain bush because it had, a certain nutrient that they needed. So
Hmm.
very, very cool. I read and listened to a little bit of your food lies, and it talked about, your father getting cancer and your mother being diagnosed with dementia. Um, for reference, they ate a standard American diet, from my understanding, and always tried to eat in accordance to what was healthy, and especially what our government put out. Um, After grieving, you pretty much quit your tech job and went on a mission to figure out what the optimal human diet was. Did it start there? Like, was diet your first assumption, or did you kind of dance around other topics of interest to
Mm.
to get there?
Yeah, it's a good question because it was actually Alzheimer's, not dementia, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
but I mean they're kind of related. And normally people don't think of those as diseases of lifestyle. Cancer and Alzheimer's, people try to just say those are genetic or maybe environmental toxins, stuff like that. But it was the same time I read the book Primal Blueprint that I mentioned, Mark
Yeah.
Sisson. And so I was already down this food path. It was all around the same time. And so I just saw the effects of food, right? I saw that it was drastic. I didn't exercise anymore. I didn't change anything about my exercise. I didn't do a single thing other than replace, instead of eating bread and pasta and tortillas, I just ate grilled mushrooms and onions. Like that's all 9 years ago, that's all I did. I just that really is, instead of eating with your hands, I ate on a plate, and it's just like I got a plate of food, I have the same things. And then I kept going from there. But my entire life changed from just doing that, right? I cut Basically what I was doing is cutting out refined grains and added sugar and seed oils. And so, I mean, I guess maybe you could say there's a few other things I did than just that one swap, but basically that was a swap, right? And I got rid of those things from my diet, and I ended up eating a bit more meat. And as I went along, I went from like lean chicken, like, oh, I thought you're supposed to eat lean chicken, and I'm like, no, I can eat red meat, and I was scared to eat red meat before. So yes, there were more changes along the way, but that changed my life, completely changed my body composition. I lost about 25 pounds of fat and gained a little bit of muscle without doing anything. I had my allergies go away that I've had my whole life, just went away. My acid reflux, sort of like heartburn, all went away. My joint pain went away. It was crazy. I was about 30, and all these things that have just been building up in my late 20s just started going away, like I was aging in reverse. So that's why I was like so food focused this whole time. And along the way, of course, I learned more about, okay, yeah, we don't want plastics, and like you got to avoid BPA or avoid phthalates. Like you don't have like crazy like perfumes and blah blah. There's a million things you can do to clean up your environment, and you know not have estrogenic foods, not have estrogenic compounds, not have heavy metals, right? We could go on and on about these other things, clean water, right? Not drinking the tap water. Uh, but I just always go back to food from all my years of this, talking to thousands of people, working with Dr. Gary, working with so many different people. Food matters most. So
Yeah.
I want to get that message out, especially with these diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. This is not just some genetic doom, that this is really controlled by our lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think a good reference to this is something that I've always gone back to, and it's sort of like a visual that I have in my head, but it's like every time you eat a bite of food, you count it with macros, right? It's got a caloric value.
Mm-hmm.
And I would equate it to, an ibuprofen having 200 milligrams, So it's kind of like what makes us think that food has nothing to do with it, yet that one ibuprofen will affect our body so greatly that it will get rid of pain, And so it's like your food is ample, the
Oh, it's
size.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're in kilogram quantities per day of this food. And it also has the power to hurt your body in that same way.
Yes.
So people don't understand that too. It's like your kilogram quantities of food, I guess we could call it, I think it's around 4 pounds a day people eat of food on average. That is all touching your digestive system and being processed and you basically, like being interacted and interfaced with your body.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're eating even the anti-nutrients that, these plant like spinach, I used to think spinach was a superfood. If you're eating all this spinach, these oxalates, like there's problems with that. I had problems with
Mm-hmm.
oxalates because these things absorb into your body. So people need to be aware of it.
Yeah. No, 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned sort of a little bit about your food journey, right? And you got into this and you lost 25 pounds and you felt great, right? You're healing ailments that you think that you never even thought about having a connection with the food that you were eating. Before all that, when you were eating a standard American diet, did you have any bad issues with things like craving or like emotional eating or really just this sort of addiction to these like highly processed foods?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've always had some sort of like binge eating type of thing going on. And I mean, I think I still have it today, but it doesn't affect me because it's like because of the new foods I eat, it just keeps it in check, and I can do this naturally, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like I don't necessarily I don't know what the definition of binge eating is. People who eat one meal a day, is that considered binge eating? But then they don't eat again for 24 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they ate a lot of food at once, but that's what their body needed to
Right.
get them through to the next 24 hours.
Yeah. So you're making a good point. Binge eating would be more of where you're uncontrollable, like you can't stop eating.
Mm-hmm.
You have a binge episode, but I mean, you're also talking about it being similar in the fact that you are starving, right? But you're eating nutrient dense food. So it's not affecting you near as greatly as what it would if it was
Yeah,
prepackaged.
yes, I do like to think of it that way. It's like that. I now, instead of having problems because I eat too much. Well, I don't eat too much. Too much is another relative term. So I can eat a lot of food, but it only gives me benefits, and there isn't the consequence of eating the wrong foods. And so
Yeah.
yes, if you're eating a lot of good foods, then that's just giving me a lot of nutrients that I need, and then I don't have to eat for a while. But yeah, I think I did have that type of thing. I think most people I know have that type of thing with the processed foods, and that's just our modern food environment. It's terrible. It's yeah. I mean, I worked in an office before. Yeah, I was in tech. I was in mechanical engineering, and yeah, they have the stuff in the office, the break room. It's the classic, the donuts, the whole thing, and I couldn't resist it. Like I always would want it. And then over my food journey for the 9 years, it went from okay, I still want it, and I got it, and I'm like, yeah, but I can do it. I can get away with it. To I don't even want it, right? And then it is amazing. Like I live here in Austin, amazing restaurants everywhere. People are always like, "Oh, what's your favorite restaurant?" or "Where do you go out?" I'm like, I don't go. I don't know. I don't like. I've been to a couple restaurants. I just don't care about them anymore. It's not appealing to me. And but I mean, I still could to not. I'm not saying I'm a saint either, Like if I had a whole bunch, if I'm at like a party, and especially if it's a party with people I know that know how to eat and prepare foods correctly, but they can have delicious foods. It's like, oh man, we made some ice cream out of like raw dairy, and like we have like, this whatever version of a brownie that's like using good ingredients. I can eat like a maniac, right? And so like that's what I'm saying. I still have these sort of binge tendencies, but it's not affecting my life in a negative way. I feel it more as a positive in the moment where I can be okay with this because I'm having fun. I'm not being like too restrictive. These foods are being prepared by someone, by hand with care. It's not like we just went to Taco Bell. And so I got to enjoy that. They wanted me to eat them, they're like, they made them. And I'm not going to be like, whoa, no, 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 that's off my diet, you know? So I get to kind of experience that. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I don't need to eat, a breakfast tomorrow, or I don't need to eat lunch. Even if I really ate that much and I'm fully satiated and I got tons of good nutrients the night before, then I know these things with my body because I'm in tune with my body. And there is that intuition, like you're mentioning, that, yeah, then I won't eat for a little bit. And then
Yeah.
maybe I just have a dinner and then I'm fine and I'm back on track and I feel great.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because I think that a lot of the disordered eating tendencies that we point out in people, it's like it goes back to where your mental headspace is, right? Like you're in a place where you're just like, I am fully nourished. I can skip breakfast and lunch tomorrow if I really did overeat. And my nutrients will balance themselves out, and then I'm back on track and I don't even think about it. Right? And I think that's where we mess up, is that these patterns don't have to be unhealthy, but they are unhealthy because of what we're eating. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, it's totally different. I know the stuff about food and addiction and binge, that it's so complex, right? Because some people could say that it is bad to have this binge, or like the fact that I didn't eat the next morning, that's like a bad sign or something.
Mm-hmm.
So the stuff's like, there's really nuance there, but it is about the headspace and about your personal journey, and like if that's gonna affect you in a negative way or a positive way. And some people, they could do that and then they could have a very negative experience the next day, or they could like feel very guilty that night, or all that stuff. But I have been on this journey for long enough where I am stoked. I'm not mad at myself at all, right? It's like I'm like, this is great, I get to enjoy this, I'm hanging out with my friends, this is awesome. Like it's all positive. Yeah, it's awesome. So, but then I don't want to like discourage people who aren't there yet, and you know what I mean, and or tell them that they can do this. Maybe not everyone can do this yet.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely think we have to go through a phase of going from a standard American diet and what I would call a standard American mindset
Hmm.
to, really reshaping how we view food and our relationship with food, until we eventually are able to look at food as the nourishment that it is and as the good thing that it is. And then we're able to be like, oh, I want to have this experience with my friends because they've homemade all of this stuff. Like, we are having a great time. We're having beautiful conversations. This is an experience I desire to have. And this is food that will nourish me, and that's a lot different than going into it and like, oh my God, I can't have the brownie, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
absolutely. It's huge. And I mean, I guess the main context here is what we're eating, right? So most
Right.
people are just eating the wrong food, and then this whole discussion is different. But
Yeah.
I'm really trying to, eat the right food. So yeah, it is
Yeah.
nourishing.
Yeah. So in your 9-year journey, when would you say it kind of switched for you? So you said, you were like, I'd have an occasional donut and I really wanted the donuts. And then all of a sudden you just didn't want the donuts anymore. How long did it take you to get into that space?
Mm, years. It all depends on your environment too. I think that might be the biggest factor looking back, is who I was hanging around with, and like what was what was going on. And if your friends are all not on board and they're all just wanting to go to like random restaurants every weekend, then it's going to take you longer, or you're going to have to just like say you're not going. Yeah, it gets really hard.
Yeah.
So changing my environment was huge, changing who I hung around with, and that happened gradually. Yeah, I don't know, just learning, experimenting, it's a long process. Sometimes you need to restrict more. Sometimes you can do it on your own and be strong even with your same environment. But
Mhm.
like, even moving to Austin was huge for me. Moving to Austin, I already knew I had all these people here that were into the same thing, and they're all about the active lifestyle, healthy eating, all this stuff. And that's when I totally cut out restaurants where I have like zero desire to go to a restaurant. It's like I will go, I just have zero desire. That was a big switch, and that took years. Where it's like I would want pass, it's like, hey, I just played beach volleyball for 4 hours. I'm super hungry. For many years, I would be like, oh, I can just pull in and get something. I mean, I'd get a healthy version of something, but now it's like I have zero desire. It's like it is not calling to me anymore.
Mhm.
That's a huge thing for people to get to this point, and I think people can get to this point, right? But it could take multiple years. Is there's only so much willpower you have,
Yeah.
and if you're constantly like wanting to pull in somewhere, then it's not going to work long term. You have to get to the point where it doesn't call out to you anymore. And I'd rather be home eating my own food because now I can make better food than at a restaurant. For me, I'm not saying I'm an exquisite chef, but I can make better food than a restaurant for my taste because I've learned about, basics of cooking and what I like. And I know I can get 2 to 3 times the protein or meat if I
Yeah.
make it myself compared to these flimsy meals at restaurants. So it's like, I just don't care anymore.
Yeah. No, I love that. You said you did mention, your friend group sort of changed. What do you feel like that was a natural like evolutionary process of your journey? Like you just started making these choices where it just kind of like put a wall between you and the friends that you had at that time, and that just eventually led to you, you know what I mean, either finding new friends or just being like this doesn't really align with me anymore.
Kind of, yeah. And it's funny because they all just know that I was the healthiest one out of all of them, and I was getting fitter as I grew older, and they were getting fatter as they grew older, but they still didn't care, and it became kind of a joke, and as a whole thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I can still hang out with them. I just don't necessarily go eat with them,
Yeah.
and I don't know. Yeah, it can work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
Well, here, I can go back to my parents actually, because you kind of talked about the standard American diet and stuff like that. So there's two different standard American diets. There's standard American diet that's like really bad, and that means going to McDonald's and like fast food 5 times a week, restaurants, packaged foods, all that stuff. And then there's standard American diet, like we're trying to follow the food pyramid and we're making our own food. So I want to be clear. Through my 20s, while I was getting worse and worse, I was doing the good version of the standard American diet. And growing up, we were doing the good version. My parents were not big spenders. They were frugal, as you say. They were not like, let's go out to eat. We're like, we are cooking at home. It is way cheaper. We made everything at home. And going out to eat was a huge treat. Going out to McDonald's was like a once a month type of thing, a big ordeal. And they still had all these problems, right? So that's another thing that like really woke me up to the how bad the food recommendations were. So we were doing the right things. We were avoiding red meat. We were eating all the lean chicken. We were eating whole grains. We were doing the low fat dairy. It was everything that we were supposed to be doing, and it didn't work. They got fatter and sicker each year. They never became obese or anything like that. They just had the visceral fat in the belly. They just had the pre-diabetes that no one told them about. Like I was going down that same path. Like I just had all of these, just bad small things that went on that I just thought were normal. And I'm telling you, I was cooking my own food, right? I was eating like the whole grain breads with the lean turkey and like the lean mayo or whatever it is. Looking
Mhm.
back, I'm like, I wouldn't eat any of this. All this stuff was processed and just weird and like just the opposite of what I eat now. But I just want to make that point that we're doing it right. My parents rarely drank at all. They didn't smoke. They did, some exercise. They were doing the right things.
Mhm. Do you, like without a shadow of a doubt, believe that if they would have been eating the way you are now, that they like, wouldn't have contracted Alzheimer's or cancer?
We can't know anything for sure. Yeah, I never
Yeah.
say anything. I think 95%. if they did this for like, yeah, the thing is, this stuff takes years. So
Yeah.
they would have had to done this for, a decade. Because that's how long food takes. That's part of the reason why it's so hard for people to understand this or make changes, is because food, what you eat, takes so long to manifest, right, into bad
Mhm.
effects. It's actually quicker to have the good effects. People can clean up their diet and feel better immediately. They can feel
Yeah.
better like the next day. They can feel better the next week. They can start losing weight the first week. But if you're eating bad food, sometimes you won't even have those ill effects for years. So,
Yeah.
so I think I am very convinced. You can't say it's 100% because, hey, maybe my mom got Alzheimer's because I don't know. There's like heavy metals. There's
Yeah.
other things that go on. There could have been something, but I mean, we were living a good life. We were in Hawaii too. We have clean air, clean water, like that whole
Mhm.
thing. Like there is nothing that my mom or dad did. Well, maybe my dad would eat a little more processed foods because he was just super cheap and would be like, oh, they have like 99-cent Whoppers back in the day. And he
Uh-huh.
would like, looking back, I'm like, this is crazy. He would just like get a Whopper for lunch from Burger King because it was only $1. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, Dad, that's just so dumb. And maybe there is a little bit of a genetic component. I think more of genetics is, as people know, it loads the gun, but your diet and lifestyle pull the trigger, right? So if, basically, some people are more susceptible to the modern bad diet and lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
So that genetic thing of like he had cancer or Alzheimer's with my mom, it's, if they ate the right diet and lifestyle, that wouldn't have happened. But
Mhm.
since they were more prone to have problems from the modern diet and lifestyle for that certain manifestation, whether it be cancer or Alzheimer's, right?
Mhm.
So that's it's kind of flipping the paradigm. So I think that through talking to the paleoanthropologists, studying all of our ancestors, they didn't have these diseases. They lived long and strong, and they had the same genes. Like genes don't change that quickly.
Right.
So yes, they if you give your body what it expects, then it's fine. Like I probably have the Alzheimer genes. I never actually did the test, but my understanding is if I live like my ancient body expects and gives it what it expects, I will not express those genes.
Our genetics, load the gun, and then, our diet pulls the trigger. So really, we are to an extent in control of our own fate, right? Maybe it will manifest, but the likelihood of it gets smaller and smaller if we eat, a diet that is conducive to our health, which I think is
Exactly.
great.
I very, 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 very much support that, but I just can't say without a shadow of a doubt. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I'm
no,
like,
I understand.
I am 95% there, and basically all the doctors and PhDs I interview are on the same page on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like you're 95% food and lifestyle, 5% genetics,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah. No, that's amazing. So, you said this sort of like this path was sort of launched by your friend group trying like Mark Sisson. Isn't it the primal diet? Is that what?
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, yeah. He called it Primal Blueprint. Primal. Yeah.
Primal blueprint. Yeah. And so it started in your friend group. Is that the same friend group who you said were getting fatter every year? Was this
Oh no,
kind of like a trend thing?
no, that's funny because these two guys who actually are making the film with me still to this day are the only
Amazing.
two friends that didn't get fatter and sicker.
That's
They were the two guys that completely changed their life, completely changed their body composition. Like people don't even believe it because we're all 39 now. We all went to high school together. We went to like kindergarten together. So I grew up in Hawaii. So we all stay in touch, and you know, I still see them every Christmas at the very least. The only two guys who did it. People don't even believe that they used to be like chunky.
yeah.
Like in their 20s they show, and we have to look at pictures. They're like, no, look, and we have the before picture. These guys look so different. They were just going down such a bad path, and now they look great. Everyone thinks they're like 31. No one believes they're 39. It's awesome.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think it really is something that we see so much within the community is like this, reverse aging concept that you've already
Yeah.
mentioned. So yeah, that's amazing. This is my last question, kind of around like the mental health space
Hmm.
and like food choices. Like how closely do you think that the two are related?
Man, I think generally it's all this stuff is 90% mental.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I that's why I say generally. It's like, how are we talking about like food addiction stuff? But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about mainly you can have all the information in the world about why this way of eating is healthy, but some people still can't do it, right? So it's mental. Like it really comes down to someone changing their mind that this is what they're going to do. And there are some good researchers out there talking about the brain, how the brain controls a lot of how we eat, and it's regulated through the brain and like satiety. Even I think satiety is very important, of like being full and like just your food choices. I mean, really everything you do is controlled by your brain, right? It's like, what am I going to do? Like, so yeah, it's a huge mental component to this. And I think a lot of people have trauma in their past. I think that I know a lot of obesity specialists, and they're like, hey, 75% of my patients come from trauma and have a traumatic childhood, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Something's going on in their past that makes them have this energy around food. And so, yeah, there's so many factors of the mental side, whether it be that or the modern environment. It's like it takes a lot of mental fortitude to just go against what everyone else is doing, right? It's like I had. That's why I said it took me years, and you have to like even maybe change your friend group or move out of the town you're in and just get a new start. So I get it, because I know people who know all the information. I actually do have a lot of personal friends that I grew up with that finally did like start listening to my podcast. It's like so cool that these guys actually did listen to it, and they're paying attention. They're following my Food Lies account, and they'll do it, and they'll have amazing success, and then they'll just bounce back, and they know it, and they're like, yeah, but I know how to do it at least. And they think that just because they know how to do it, that at any point they can do it. I'm like, well, yeah, but then it's like you're still not doing it. I mean, you did it once, and but they have this optimism, like, oh, but if I wanted to, I could do it again. I'm like, but you're not doing it again. You're just kind of going back into your normal life, and each year you're gaining a few more pounds. So
Mm-hmm.
you can have the info, you can believe in it, you can have done it. That doesn't mean you're going to stick to it and
Right.
actually do it.
Yeah. 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 No, very insightful. Very insightful.
I don't know, but I didn't give anyone any tips to like improve that. I don't know if you have some. It's like, how do you combat that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's a mindset. I think, people telling, a lot of people don't use self-talk, right? Like, every day when I wake up, if I, and I've been in therapy for years. I had sort of a traumatic childhood and, definitely struggled with, eating disorders and things of that nature. And, something that I do to check in with myself is I use dissociation as a coping mechanism, right? So, like, I'll just cut off emotionally. And that would cause me to binge eat as well because I have
Mm.
no emotional capacity to even, check in on myself or even the awareness to kind of like take myself out of that. So if I start feeling like I'm on this, if I get extremely overwhelmed or I'm really busy or really stressed and I get on this very like pragmatic anti-emotional wheel, I
Mm-hmm.
will, literally be able to catch myself now because I've practiced it for so long and be like, oh, if you keep doing this, like you will dissociate. And then we know like the cycle of like going into that dissociated state will, cause a variety of ill effects. But I will say that I personally think that, putting yourself in a situation where you have to face yourself, right? Whether that be like check-in photos or whatever it is, it may seem minuscule, but eventually you'll start looking at the pictures and looking for the good instead of the bad, right? Like
Mm.
it's like all you see is the bad at first. You're like, oh, my love handle this and this or that, and all of that can be rooted in I would say your general mental health. And then it's like eventually after you've looked at it so long, you're like, why am I beating myself up right now? Like just, and then you start looking at the picture in a different light
Mm.
and you're like, oh man, like I can see changes here, or this looks really good, or like I looked beautiful that day, or, whatever. It's kind of the phenomena of when people take a photo of themselves and they're like, oh, I hate that picture. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come back a year later and they look at that, they're like, man, I looked good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about the perspective and the lens that you're looking through. And so I think there are just little things that you can do every day to sort of change that perspective and that lens to, be beneficial for you instead of detrimental. So, I mean, I think there's just a lot of little ways. I think everybody's so different, like maybe something that I do is I like look in the mirror and I'm like, you are one sexy MFer, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But, my thing is humor. I love to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to frame it in a way that, makes me giggle,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, and it's like, it's hilarious that I even thought I was fat in that photo,
Uh-huh.
And so then it makes me look at this photo now and be like, wow, I really thought poorly of myself then, but I look 10 times better now. And so I can actually look at myself and be like, I look good, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think perspective is everything, and sort of like changing your mental headspace to, just be more conducive to your exterior world, but also changing your exterior world to be more conducive to your interior,
Mm-hmm.
like your desires, like the person that you do want to be.
I like that. Yeah, I've actually thought of this once as like how I identify as someone healthy. Right? It's like once you it's the self-talk a little bit. It's like if you once you identify as someone who eats healthy, like then it kind of shapes your everything you do. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? Like some
Yeah.
people just don't even care and they just do nothing. But it's like if you're like you have to make the decision that it's like I am someone who eats healthy, and
Mm-hmm.
then all your decisions are kind of based on that. It's like
Yeah.
what would a person who eats healthy do in this situation? But you need to
Yeah.
make that mental switch because if you're just kind of like, oh, I'm on a diet, that's totally different than like believing as someone, it's like you made this decision that I eat healthy because I I don't have to be on my diet and still be a healthy person, right?
Yeah.
Like my example, it's like it's very different. It's like in that moment I ate maybe a less than ideal food, but I saw my core is just I'm someone who eats healthy now, and
Yeah.
so it was fine because I know that I'm not going to do it again the next day,
Yeah.
or I'm going to go, I don't know, hiking or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just I think people need to make that mental switch.
Yeah. Mel Robbins has actually referred to this a lot. She's like, look, if you want to be the person that you want to be, like tell yourself that you are the person that you want to be, right? So if I'm like walking around and I'm like, I'm a CEO, you know,
Mm-hmm.
eventually I'm going to go Google, what do CEOs do?
Uh-huh.
Like,
How to
and
start
then
a business. Yeah.
how to start a business. And so then, you look up 6 months later and you're like, dang, I'm a CEO now.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of power in just making the choice. Right. And it's like you say the same phrase all over, right? It's like, I'm in constant pursuit of health. And so, even if you're eating a brownie at table with your parents and they're like, oh, what happened to your diet? You can be like, I am in a constant pursuit of health. This brownie won't hurt me,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
and then you wake up the next day and I'm in a constant pursuit of health. And yeah, so I think making choices is a huge, huge part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. What was your inspiration for the Peak Human podcast? And how does this podcast continually inspire you?
Oh yeah. Well, it's just along the way, it's really the film. This all this stuff just happened because I decided to do the film, and that was this turning point in my life. The social media stuff just happened because I started making the film. The
Mm-hmm.
podcast, I'm like, I'm interviewing these amazing scientists, PhDs, world recognized people. Why would I not also do a podcast with them?
Yeah.
So it's been the best thing ever. It's let people get a lot of this content before the film comes out. It actually got into #1 in the nutrition category for the entire United States, which was amazing. 5-year overnight success. No, it was
5 year overnight.
it was a lot. Yeah, a lot of work, and man, I just love it. It's so fun to connect with all these great people.
Yeah, no, I feel I mean, I'm only,
Mhm.
on like episode 9, but I
Mhm.
feel that. I mean, the amount of connection that you can get with on podcasts is just, people that you wouldn't ordinarily connect with, it's definitely inspiring all the time.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. We're right at about time.
Mhm.
Before we go, I want you to tell people where they can find you and Food Lies for sure, and Peak Human Podcast.
Food Lies, yeah. Just search for Food Lies. I'm on all the 4 social networks. Instagram's my main one, but Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I would say go to the Food Lies YouTube channel and watch the intro.
Mm-hmm.
That took us over a year to make. Just as along the way as we were making the film, very intricate. We made every shot almost, and it kind of tells my story a little. And yeah, just Food Life. Follow me at Food Lives. And I also have Nose to Tail too. I have a whole grass fed regenerative meat company that I started along the way. So I think,
Just
yeah, yeah, we have a lot of stuff like even beef tallow body care. People are really into that stuff. Like if once you go down this rabbit hole, you realize you don't want to have all these weird chemicals on your body because your skin is your biggest organ and it just soaks it all up. And so we made stuff called skin food that's made out of beef tallow and just like really natural things, like only a few ingredients and soap and a lot of meat. We do meat, we ship it everywhere. So yeah, nose to tail. That's a whole nother side of the story is yeah, the like how to do this well, right? Regenerative agriculture, like raising animals well. Like pork and chicken is all pasture raised, no corn, no soy, organic feed, like all that stuff. So yeah, we can leave it at that for now. But if you can learn more at nosetotale.org.
yeah, and maybe part 2. Meet
Yeah.
cute part 2.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It has been such a pleasure and an honor to hear your story and sort of how you've gotten here. So thank you so much for sharing.
All right. Well, thank you. Good times.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Until we meet again.